Lonely rancher found a young Apache girl hanging on a tree with a sign, "White man don't forgive." Old ranchers still whisper the tale of Calder Wyatt, a man whose life was carved by dust, silence, and the lonesome wind of the frontier. They say if you sit long enough by a dying fire on a cold desert night, you'll hear his name carried on the coyote's howl, woven into the rustling mesquite. His story is not just one of cattle and fences, not merely of land and toil, but of blood, love, vengeance, and the strange ways the desert remembers what men wish to forget. It begins with a tree, a girl, and a message burned into memory as fierce as any branding iron. White man don't forgive. But before the tree, before the girl, there was Calder, a solitary rancher living on the edge of nowhere. His ranch nothing more than a scatter of timbers, a wind-scoured corral, and the lowing of lean cattle. Calder's life had always been quiet, too quiet perhaps, shaped by the silence of an empty homestead and the ghosts of things he never spoke of. He was the kind of man the land seemed to own more than he owned it, weathered by sun and storm, bound by loneliness as strong as iron shackles. The land itself was unforgiving. Dust storms rolled like armies, blotting out the sky, choking man and beast alike. Coyotes sang from the ridges, sharp against the night air, and more than once Calder had woken to find his cattle picked apart by scavengers. The soldiers from the fort marched the roads nearby, boots heavy, eyes suspicious, rifles always ready. The settlers who passed through left behind rumors and resentments, tales of raids, ambushes, blood spilled in the dirt. In such a world, a man learned quickly that trust was rarer than rain. Yet Calder stayed, perhaps because there was nowhere else to go, perhaps because leaving would mean surrendering the only thing he had managed to claim in a life that had otherwise given him little. He carried himself with the weight of one who had buried too many hopes beneath desert stone. Folks in the nearby town called him the Lonely Rancher, half in pity, half in mockery. A man who had never taken a wife, never raised a family, never joined the laughter of the saloon or the prayers of the church. He was part of the land, and the land was part of him, dry, harsh, but enduring. It was during a stretch of days when the desert seemed to hold its breath that Calder first stumbled upon the omen that would unravel his fate. The sun had been merciless, bleeding the sky white, baking the earth until even the lizards seemed too weary to scurry. Calder rode out alone, checking fence lines that sagged under the strain of wind and neglect. His horse moved slow, hooves muffled against the dust, the silence pressing down like a hand. That was when he saw it, a dark silhouette against the blazing horizon. A lone tree, twisted and gnarled, standing defiant in the emptiness. And hanging from its crooked arm, a shape that made his blood run cold. At first he thought it was a corpse, some poor soul left for the vultures, swinging ever so slightly in the still air. But as he drew nearer, he saw her, slender, young, her skin darkened by the sun, her dress torn and ragged. A sign was tied to her neck with rawhide, the words scrawled in blackened charcoal, "White man don't forgive." For a moment Calder thought she was dead, her head slumped forward, hair hiding her face. But then he saw her chest rise, shallow and faint, a fragile thread of life clinging on despite the cruelty of whoever had left her there. She was not a corpse but a girl, an Apache girl no older than 17. Stories would later spread, each retelling growing wilder with time. Some claimed she had been a spirit, sent by the desert to test Calder's soul. Others swore she was a fugitive, a killer's daughter, marked for vengeance. And a few whispered she was the last of her kind, cursed by her people and abandoned. But on that day, in that moment, Calder saw none of those things. He saw only a human life balanced on the edge of death, and he acted not with thought but with instinct. The knife flashed once in the hard light of the sun, cutting the rope that bound her to the tree. She fell into his arms like a broken bird, weightless, trembling, her breath shallow but present. Her skin bore scars, slashes across her arms, welts on her back, signs of cruelty not inflicted by the wilderness but by men. Her lips moved faintly, forming words too soft to hear, words swallowed by the desert wind. Calder carried her to his horse, propped her gently, and turned back toward his lonely homestead. Every step his horse took seemed to echo with foreboding, as though the land itself was watching. The vultures circled above, but they did not follow. The wind shifted, carrying with it the faint smell of smoke, as if somewhere not far violence had already taken place. What Calder did not know was that his act of mercy, his refusal to leave the girl to die, would set in motion a storm that would consume him, the town, and perhaps even the desert itself. For mercy in such a land was not a virtue but a danger, and the sign around her neck was no mere warning, it was a promise. And so the tale begins, as all true folk tales do, with a choice made in silence. A lonely rancher, an Apache girl half dead on a tree, and a message carved into memory. White man, don't forgive. Some say the desert held its breath that day, waiting to see what price mercy would demand. Others say the spirits of the frontier stirred, amused by the folly of man. Whatever the truth, one thing remains certain. From that moment on, Calder Wyatt's life was no longer his own. They say mercy is the kind of thing that marks a man, leaves him branded deep in ways no iron ever could. For Calder Wyatt, that mark came the day he cut down the girl and carried her away from death's grip. It should have ended there, with a nameless act and a forgotten grave. But the desert does not forgive kindness so easily. Mercy, out on the frontier, was not a gift. It was a spark. And sparks, in the dry winds of the west, grow into fire. The girl lay silent for days in Calder's cabin, drifting between fever and faint breath. He had no medicine, only rough hands, clean water, and the quiet patience of a man who had lived too long with silence. She drank when he pressed the cup to her lips, turned when he cooled her forehead with damp cloth. The scars on her body told stories he could not read. Lash marks, burns, cuts that seemed older than she was. Yet she did not die. Against all sense, against the weight of cruelty, she endured. It was not long before whispers began. Neighbors saw smoke from Calder's chimney and wondered why he kept shut away. A rider from town spotted him hauling water at dawn, his face more guarded than ever. And then, like carrion birds drawn to blood, rumors circled. By the week's end, the story had grown. Calder Wyatt was sheltering an Apache fugitive. Some said she was a killer's daughter. Others swore she was a witch, cursed to bring death to any man who touched her. None of them came close to the truth, but in a land built on suspicion, truth mattered little. The soldiers were the first to arrive. A pair of blue coats from the fort, stiff in their saddles, eyes cold as bayonets. They knocked at Calder's cabin door, rifles resting easy in their hands. He met them with the hard stillness of a man unwilling to bend. They asked about the girl. He said nothing. They asked again, sharper, warning that harboring an enemy was a crime punishable by the noose. Still he said nothing, and in the silence the soldiers saw their answer. They rode off without a word, but their shadows lingered long after the dust of their departure. From then on, Calder was marked. The townsfolk avoided his eyes when he rode in for supplies. Some spat as he passed. Children whispered the tale of the Apache girl who had bewitched him. And at night, fires burned on the ridges where men gathered, their voices carried on the wind like the growl of distant thunder. The message was clear. The desert might have spared her, but men would not. Inside the cabin, life clung on stubbornly. The girl stirred more each day, though her words came in whispers too soft to catch. Calder never pressed, never asked who she was or where she came from. He only knew the weight of the sign that had hung from her neck. White man, don't forgive. The message was not for her alone. It was for him. Weeks passed, and still he kept her hidden. It was not loyalty that bound him, nor love, at least not yet, but something older, harder to name. A sense that if he let her die, he would be no different from the vultures circling overhead. She was young, too young to have earned such scars. And though he never admitted it, Calder saw in her a reflection of himself. Abandoned, beaten, but unbroken. The town grew restless. Preachers warned of heathen blood corrupting the valley. Ranchers muttered that the girl's presence would bring raiders to their doorstep. Mothers pulled their children close, whispering that evil had settled in Calder Wyatt's cabin. And still he stood firm, a lone figure against a tide of fear. One night, the tide broke. Torches flickered through the darkness, voices shouting, feet pounding against dry earth. A mob had gathered: settlers, farmers, a handful of drunken cowhands. Faces lit with fire, hands heavy with rope and guns. They demanded the girl. They demanded that Calder hand her over, lest they burn his cabin to the ground with both of them inside. The desert held its breath again. Calder stood in the doorway, rifle in his hands, the girl behind him weak but standing. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Then came the thunder of hooves. The soldiers again, this time more than two, riding hard with sabers flashing. The mob scattered at the sight of authority, torches falling into dust. But if Calder thought the girl was safe, he was wrong. The soldiers did not come to protect her. They came to claim her. The captain dismounted, face grim, eyes sharp as steel. He declared the girl a prisoner of the United States Army, guilty of crimes by blood if not by deed. She would be taken to the fort, tried, and punished. Calder had no say in the matter. He could step aside or he could be cut down where he stood. And here the folk tale bends, as all old tales do. For no man can say with certainty what choice Calder Wyatt made. Some swear he lowered his rifle, watched them bind the girl's wrists, and let her be carried away into the night. Others tell it different, that he raised his weapon, fired into the dark, and vanished into legend with the girl at his side, never seen again. A few even whisper that neither man nor girl survived, their bodies left to rot beneath the tree where it all began. But the desert keeps its own truth. There are those who claim to have seen them years later, riding south into Mexico, the girl no longer broken but fierce as a hawk, Calder older but free at last of loneliness. And there are those who say their ghosts wander still, two shadows moving across the ridges at dusk, forever bound by mercy and the price it demanded. What is certain is this: the land remembered. The townsfolk spoke of the sign for years after, painted bold on the memory of every man, woman, and child. White man don't forgive. Some took it as a curse, a warning that blood debt never washes clean. Others saw it as justice, a reminder that cruelty leaves scars deeper than skin. And the oldest ranchers, the ones who lived long enough to see the desert swallow whole towns, simply shook their heads and said, "The desert remembers what men choose to forget." So the tale of Calder Wyatt passed from voice to voice, fire to fire, until it became less history than myth. Was the girl flesh and blood, or a spirit in disguise? Was Calder a fool, a savior, or just another man lost to loneliness? No one can say, and perhaps it does not matter. What matters is the telling, the remembering, the warning carried on the wind. Mercy has its price, and the desert never forgets. And now you've heard it, as it was told to me, as it was told to those before me. A lonely rancher, a young Apache girl, a tree, a sign, and a choice that echoes still. If you believe stories like this deserve to live on, if you want more forgotten legends of the Wild West, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss the next tale by firelight. Because out here, the desert keeps many secrets, and we've only just begun to uncover them.